Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name's Valerie Wacko. I'm Deputy Director for Collections and Research and Chief Innovation Officer here at the Royal Ontario Museum. And I am delighted that you could join us today for the program ROM Ideas, Global Stories of Ontario. I have to say, I think we all have to enjoy ourselves doubly today because the subway is really stopping a lot of people from joining us. There was a closure that wasn't planned for this weekend when we planned this event, but all the more for all of us, so enjoy it fully. This program is generously supported by the Schmidt family. I'll be your MC for the afternoon, and I'm looking forward to hearing today's presentations very much. I'd like to take a moment to ask you to silence your cell phone in case you have one that's audible. I'd also like to begin by acknowledging that ROM sits on the ancestral lands of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Anishinaabe Nation, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, since time immemorial to today. This afternoon, I'm excited to be joined by some of ROM's talented staff for a series of 5 thought-provoking presentations that feature ROM's most groundbreaking research on a wide array of topics. Today's format has 20 minutes for each of the first 4 presentations, followed by 10 minutes for your questions. ROM Ideas highlights the unique perspectives and expertise at ROM and invites you to reflect on the art, culture, and nature all around us, while considering the role that ROM plays in how we collectively understand our world. The presentations highlight the importance of ROM's work as caretaker of cultural belongings in Ontario and leader in scientific research and collaboration. By featuring stories that connect directly to Ontario's communities and resources, ROM Ideas underscores the myriad ways in which the museum is woven into the fabric of Canada's most globally connected and diverse province. We're also happy you can be with us today to listen and think about that world. I'd like to introduce my colleague, David Evans, Co-Chief Curator, Natural History, and James and Louise Temerty, Endowed Chair, Vertebrate Fossils, and he'll introduce today's first 4 talks. These will be followed by a refreshment break, and then we'll reconvene for the 2025 Vaughan Lecture.
Thank you, Valerie, and thank you all for spending your afternoon with us and exploring some of the work that's being done here at ROM. I'm going to be your MC for this next series of short talks, and I have the pleasure of introducing my colleagues. A reminder that each of the first 4 talks will be 20 minutes, followed by a 10-minute Q&A session, reserved for audience questions at the end that the speakers themselves will moderate. Our first presentation is titled Between the Sun and Lens, the Photography of Mazher Master. This presentation is by Dipali Dewan, and it explores the recently identified archive of photography Mazher Master. This unique archival resource traces his previously unrecognized photographic practice from the 1940s to the 1970s, and from India to Pakistan to Ottawa, Canada. How did this archive of South Asian photography make its way to Ontario? What does it tell us about the history of South Asian photography, and why is it important to local communities? Dipali is going to answer that today. Dipali Dewan is the Dan Mishra Senior Curator of Global South Asia here at the ROM. She is also an Associate Professor in the Department of Art History at the University of Toronto. Her research spans issues of colonial, modern, and contemporary visual culture in South Asia and the South Asian diaspora, with a focus on the history and theory of photography and its critical historiographies. Welcome, Dipali.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody is doing well. Let's start my clock. I am so pleased and honored to be kicking off our program today. It's one of my favorites. I get to share the kinds of things I've been thinking about, and I get to hear my colleagues tell us about the kinds of things they have been thinking about for the past year. So while I am the curator of Global South Asia here at the ROM, I care for 5,000 years of art and culture, my research interest is in the history of photography. I am interested in how photography shapes our perceptions of the world and of ourselves. And I like to think about how the photographic image is not just reflective, but in fact productive or generative of our reality. So in this talk, I'm going to speak about photographer Mazher. I will focus on his work from the 1940s to the 1960s, and my aim is to give you a sense of his work, the material in his archive, and what it has to offer. Mazher practiced photography at a time of profound change on the South Asian subcontinent, from the period of British colonialism through partition, when the region was divided into two countries, and through independence from colonial rule. And he moved around during this time from India to Pakistan, and then later migrating to Ottawa, Canada. What is significant about his work, I believe, is that, one, it gives insight into photographic practice in South Asia, especially for a time that is little researched and documented. And two, it provides insight into the way photography may have played a role in shaping historical events. The reason I have been lucky to even get to study Mazher's work is thanks to an Ontario family. I was introduced to his work through his younger son, Mustafa Mazher, who invited me to his home to see his father's archive. I was amazed at the wealth and breadth of Mazher's output. The collection consists of about 5,000 medium format black and white negatives, about 100 vintage prints, documents relating to his photographic practice, and a few 8mm film reels. So in this talk, all the images that I show pertaining to Mazher's work come from this collection, though in many cases, the negatives have been scanned and then digitally made into positives, because I want you to see what the image looks like. So here is an example of one of the vintage prints. A sheep herder walks at an angle to the camera, wrapped in his shawl to protect against the morning chill. The sun is just coming out, but is still low on the horizon, thus producing long shadows. There is a haziness about the whole scene, a visual quality characteristic of many of Mazher's photographs. The notion of situating the subject between the sun and the lens, in other words, backlit, rather than putting the lens between the sun and the subject, which is more frontlit, was central to much of Mazher's photography. It was about capturing an environment, a feeling, not just a scene. Mazher was born in 1920 in Palanpur, a small princely territory alongside British India. And I want to just show you what point out what I'm showing you here. So just to locate South Asia within the world, there's a little star there to indicate sort of where the geographic region I'm talking about. This is a map of what is roughly present-day Rajasthan and Gujarat in these adjacent areas. And Palanpur is right down here. Mazher, oops, I'm going backwards. Mazher was part of the Dawudi Bohra community, an Ismaili branch of Shia Islam. His grandfather had established a retail chain in Yemen at the port city of Aden and in Ethiopia as part of the Indian Ocean network of traders and merchants that stretches back millennia. With the wealth created through this business, he bought land and built a large home in Palanpur, designed by a French architect, which is where Mazher grew up. Photography was practiced in South Asia shortly after its inception in 1839. It grew quickly in popularity. Colonial networks facilitated the access to camera equipment and supplies. Palanpur was small, but played a big role in the encouragement of photography in South Asia. In many ways, Mazher came about at a time when the old world of photography was shifting into a new one, where the medium was more accessible through cheaper cameras that were easier to use. You could send your film for processing, and more people were taking photographs for themselves instead of going to a professional studio. Here is another image to give you a sense of his work. Boats on water were a favorite subject. In this image, again, the boat is situated between the sun and his camera. The sun is just coming up or going down, making the boat into a silhouette, but also causing a dramatic reflection of light against the clouds in the sky. In some ways, while the boat seems to be the subject, the image draws your eye upward, perhaps suggesting a spiritual reference. In another example, two figures walk down a tree-lined path on a winter morning. Here again, the sun is in the distance facing the camera while the trees are in silhouette. The morning mist has not yet dissipated. Such images show a non-urban environment or village scene. There is a sense of timelessness about it. The timeless village, in fact, was a trope in the 19th century and early 20th centuries, used to evoke a pre-colonial past, where it was believed the essential qualities of South Asia were located. Such images created a world without traces of British colonialism and contributed to, consciously or unconsciously, a spirit of anti-colonial resistance. Now, one of the reasons why Palanpur played a critical role in photo history was because the ruler of Palanpur had an official photographer, A.L. Said, and you see his picture here on the left and an example of his work on the right, and in fact, these are in the Ram's collection. It is through him that Mazher was exposed to photography. Said's sons were childhood friends of Mazher, one in particular, and they all went on to follow in the family business as photographers. While there is no trace of that mentor relationship other than family oral history, it is likely Mazher learned alongside them. So here I have a photo of A.L. Said on the left, alongside one by Mazher on the right. And I hope you can see that it's clear how well the student absorbed the lessons from his mentor. So in these images, there's a similarity in the pose, the framing, and emphasis on the fabric folds and wrinkled skin. Another comparison here. In these images, there is a similarity in the strong shadows that produce tonal contrast. Built environment turns into abstract form, interrupted by a figure of a child. Now, Mazher lived at a time of tremendous growth of photography. There were various systems in place to encourage amateur photographers, and these are very present in that collection, in the archive that is preserved. One example are camera clubs. And in these images, you can see sort of groups of photographers practicing together. In one, lessons in still life photography, and in the other, outdoor photography. Hosted by illustrated newspapers and magazines, photo competitions were another way to encourage amateur photographers. This newspaper is dated to 1935 and shows Mazher winning first prize at the age of 15 years old with the photo Her Eid Prayers, so the one on the far right. Mazher also applied to competitions not only within South Asia, but through the transnational networked photo world. In 1948, he was selected as one of 12 out of more than 3,200 submissions globally to receive the top prize from the American Photography magazine. And you can see his image called The Snake Charmer, published in the magazine on your lower right. And this all kind of contributed to his growing confidence as a photographer. There were also specialty magazines produced by photo retailers. So, for example, the Kodak Bulletin, Kodak I think is a name everybody recognizes, on your right, and Camera in the Tropics on your left. And Camera in the Tropics, in fact, precedes the Kodak Bulletin and was started by an organization called the Central Camera Company, which was based in Bombay. So homegrown kind of retailers producing these publications to encourage amateur photography. And in this case, you see examples of Mazher actually publishing articles for others to learn how to take photography around sunset pictures or monsoon sunsets. Palampur had among the first all-India salons of photography, which were exhibitions put on by photo societies and camera clubs. So Mazher, along with A.L. Saeed's sons, participated in the organizing committee over several years and, of course, displayed their work there too. And I just want to point out on the right side, in fact, you have the group of them in the process of selecting from lots of submissions which photographs would be for the exhibition, and you have Mazher Mazher right there. So indeed, there were numerous opportunities for displaying their work. And here I'm showing you the backside of the shepherd photo that I showed earlier. And in collections, oftentimes what is on the other backside of a photograph is as important and interesting as what's on the front. And so on the back, you can see that, in fact, there's labels from different exhibitions that Mazher Mazher sent this print to be displayed in and where it won awards. So, for example, Camera Pictorialists of Bombay from 1941, Photographic Society of India, 1942. In the 1940s, Mazher Mazher went to school in Bombay and was exposed to the sights of the urban environment. So, for example, this image of a gem cutter. It is a profession done by hand in India that has been known, India has been known as a center of gem cutting for millennia, and to this day continues to be the center of gem cutting in the world. It is noteworthy that the camera is positioned in such a way that the cutting tool frames the gem cutter, almost acting like a halo. So all of this very deliberate type of choreography and framing of the scene. After partition, Mazher Mazher migrated to Karachi, a port city in the province of Sindh in the newly created Pakistan. Partition was an event where 12 to 18 million people moved across a new border, dividing the land into the new nations of Pakistan and India. Known as the world's largest forced migration, partition was sudden, violent, and chaotic. For Mazher, it was an opportunity to establish a new life. One aspect of this new life was to turn his serious amateur photography practice into a profession as a photojournalist, although it never quite became full-time. He documented the historic moments of independence from British rule and the birth of the new modern nation states. In this double-page spread from Flashlight magazine, several of his photographs are reproduced, specifically referencing the birth of Pakistan. You have the Constituent Assembly on the lower left, the flag hoisting ceremony on the lower right, and in fact, an image of the new Prime Minister of Pakistan, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Indeed, Mazher Mazher seemed to regularly cross the border to document events. And here is a photograph of his showing a gathering with India's Prime Minister Nehru and President Rajendra Prasad. They are spinning cotton thread an activity that became a political symbol of self-sufficiency after British textile mills, through colonial rule, had systematically suppressed the cotton industry in India. And so you can see these little box spinning wheels that were used at political rallies. Imagine our politicians sitting and spinning thread as one of the activities. Now, Mazher also made significant contributions to the growing media landscape that supported new nations, working as a staff photographer or on assignment. For example, publishing his photographs on the covers of the Illustrated Weekly of Pakistan, which you see here, which in fact have only recently been identified by his son Mohammed during a recent visit to the National Archives in Islamabad. So this is like fresh off the press. Mazher also made significant contributions. Mazher also obtained professional assignments to document the development of the new environment in Pakistan. Here are a series of photographs of the building of Islamabad, which replaced Karachi as a capital of Pakistan. These photos show large modern buildings in a vast open space, characteristic of the area's terrain surrounded by mountains. Another assignment was to photograph the Sui gas plant, which was a natural gas field in Balochistan province. It was discovered in 1952, started production in 1955, and is still the largest natural gas field in Pakistan. These images of pipes taken at stark angles emphasize lines and long shadows and have an abstract quality that make them reflective of what was modernist aesthetics at the time. So kind of thinking about how his work fit into the kind of more global visual practices. And I want to share just two more examples because I really like this series of work. One showing just how abstract the images get on your left, where you have this kind of curving pipe that comes out of nowhere and feels monumental. And another showing Mazher's strategy of contrasting tradition and modernity by placing the camel rider in front of the plant, in some ways saying these are two modes of energy, as if to underscore old and new means of fuel transportation. Now, finding a source of energy and developing one's natural resources was an important part of the self-governance of new independent nations. Of course, such celebratory images of extraction need to be reconsidered today in light of our awareness of the Earth's limited resources and issues of climate change. So despite his professional work, Mazher continued to pursue personal projects, including exploring the architectural heritage of Karachi, such as the 17th century Shah Jahan Mosque in Thatta. The angle of the photograph seems to layer the archways into a play of geometric shapes enhanced by the alternating light and dark pattern of the brick. Indeed, in Karachi, Mazher's work becomes more angular and abstract, such as these scenes, which are really studies in light and shadow. I'd like to pause and talk a little bit about how Mazher's work intersected with the international aesthetic movements, such as pictorialism. Now, pictorialism was promoted by various groups in Europe and the US from the late 19th century, including the Brotherhood of the Linked Ring in England and the Photo Secession in New York. Most histories present pictorialism as a short-lived movement sandwiched between the advent of smaller automatic cameras and the ugliness and devastation of the World War I. But there is increasing recognition that pictorialism continued, especially elsewhere in the world, long after it fizzled out in Europe and the United States. Just want to show you examples of pictorialist photographers. These ones are the most well-known: Henry Peach Robinson on your left, Alfred Stieglitz on your right. Pictorialists were united in withdrawing from the notion that photography was simply a tool of documentation. Instead, they argued that the camera could be an expressive tool to make photographs look like painting or drawings through soft focus, creative framing, tonal contrast, and atmospheric effects. It was about personal vision and individuality. Pictorialist style became known to practitioners in South Asia through the same colonial roots that photography itself did soon after it was invented. Indian pictorial photographers include Shepor Bedwar, who made photographs with actors and stage settings based on mythological stories. And another example is J.N. Unwala, co-founder of the Camera Pictorialists of Bombay, who argued for the recognition of photography as an art form in his writing. I think these two images make clear how much Mazher was aware of the larger world of photo practice. Paired here with another pictorialist, K.N. Rustamji, both have images of a landscape with figures walking down a path. The sky dominates the composition with dramatic clouds, though in this case I would argue that Mazher's image is more successful. I could go on and on showing you a ton of images, but we're about to close down. I just want to show you this one. I love it. In this image, bananas on the side of the road become a study in still life and light. Pictorialism often gets a bad rap for being little more than pretty pictures, but scholar Charmaine To, who writes more about Singapore photography, has argued that pictorialism in Asia took on multiple roles, acting as a symbol of democracy and modernity, a way of staging national identity. Pictorialism was an aesthetic language that embodied self-expression and an individual's unique view of the world. It encouraged freedom of thought. In these ways, in a colonial context, it is not a stretch to imagine how pictorialism encouraged a desire for self-governance, contributing to an environment that led to the independence of South Asia from British colonialism. In 1972, Mazher migrated to Canada with his family, settling in Ottawa, and in the late 1960s, In the late 1960s, there was a shift in Canadian immigration policy to prioritize education and skills over country of origin or race. In Ottawa, Mazher fulfilled a long-time dream to set up a photo studio, which he operated until his untimely passing in 1977 at the age of 57. His photographic collection came with him from Karachi to Ottawa, but then was stored in the family home relatively untouched for the next few decades until his sons brought the collection to Toronto. Since 2019, there have been several public outcomes with the collection, including an online exhibition, an Instagram account, interview with Mazher's younger son, Mustafa, and an MA thesis, which won the Photographic Historical Society of Canada Award for the year it came out. And I just have a collage of images here to show you all those outcomes. Even as recently as December 2024, we had the opportunity to interview Mazher's elder son, Mohammed. While much has been done, there is still much to do. For example, here is ROM paper conservator Janet Cowing doing a test to remove a print that had been dry mounted to board. This revealed important info recorded by Mazher about the settings on the camera when he took a certain shot. And so there's actually several more of these to do. As well, there is more to be done to understand the role that Mazher's wife, Banu Mazher, played in his photographic production, serving as a frequent subject, as in this beautiful image, likely made shortly after their marriage, and as a partner in assisting him on photography excursions or in running the photo studio that was set up at home in Karachi. In this way, it is important that the role of women are not erased from the history of photography. Closing then on one of my favorite images from the collection, my talk here reflects just the beginning of a subject that requires more study. I hope it made clear some of the ways Mazher's work gives insight into the practice of a remarkable photographer, but also into the environment of photo production in the mid-20th century South Asia. But more than that, it also encouraged a certain kind of view of the world, one that was personal and individual, that imagined South Asia both as a place of continuity with a pre-colonial past, as well as a place building a future under the conditions of self-governance. What role did the photographic medium play to move South Asia on the path of freedom? Finally, I don't think it's a coincidence that Mazher's collection is in Ontario. It is the result of certain patterns of migration that have made Ontario a place connected to the world. And given the significance of the South Asian diaspora in Canada, I am convinced that a history of South Asian photography is sitting in diasporic family homes waiting to be revealed. What does it mean to preserve the work of Mazher in one of Canada's main cultural institutions? Part of the process of decolonizing our colonial institutions is about making different choices about what we preserve and for whom. Through collecting differently, we can decolonize conventional photo history that tends to focus on European and American photographers as the innovators. By collecting differently, we can make the histories of diasporic families an undeniable part of the national narrative. The results of such collecting can be a resource for the people of Ontario to understand their relationship to the global, not as something far away, but as a place near to home. Thank you so much. Now, we have just a couple minutes left for any questions or comments. But before we do this, if you could just raise the house lights a little bit, I really want to give thanks to Mazher's family for caring for his archive and supporting my work on it. And I'm really happy to say that they are here with us today. And if it's not too embarrassing, I would just please ask that you briefly stand up so we can acknowledge you. Please. So thank you for being collaborators on this journey with me and bringing Mazher's photography to all of us. So if there are any questions or comments, please. Observations, connections you want to make. Yes, Eva. How dare you ask me technical questions about photographs right now? So gelatin silver was one of the main formats of photography from the 20th century. Photography is based on salts that then turn into silvers through a chemical process. And so the gelatin is, and I don't know exactly what the material is, but it is a substance in which the silver particles are held in suspension. So that's what gelatin silver is. Yeah. And that substance changes depending on the period of photography you're talking about. Anybody else? Please, Mustafa.
A quick comment. All 4 of my children and all 8 of my grandchildren were all born in Canada. They've been here for 55 years. And I think things like this not only connect us to the past, but our future generations to the past. I just wanted to comment.
Thank you so much.
Thank Ron for doing that.
Yeah, thank you so much for that beautiful thought. One more. Yes, I see in the middle. No. No, and maybe I glossed over that very quickly. There are some 8mm film, like actually moving picture film, but no undeveloped film, but certainly a lot of negatives that weren't printed actually as photographs. And that's a question of, one has the negatives, but there's so much work that happens between a negative and the printing of a print. And we're lucky to have vintage prints that Mazher himself printed, so we can at least study the kind of choices he made in terms of the tones, the framing of how he translated a negative into the final print. Some of the blue kind of paint that you saw in some of the negatives was in fact tinting that photographers used to do on the negative in order to manipulate the final picture. And so where it's tinted, it ends up being a lighter color on the final print. So anyway, this is just a short way of saying there's no undeveloped images, but there's so much yet to be studied about what the image would have looked like from the negative. Okay, I think that's it for my time. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will continue the program.